Hello everyone, welcome to another session of Schneider Electric PLC training tutorials where you will learn Schneider Electric PLC programming. Okay, so this is a continuation of our Schneider Electric training series, specifically the Modicon M340 PLC programming tutorials. So in the last tutorial we have discussed the move operation. In this tutorial we are going to continue with the selection operation. Okay, so this selection operation allows us to select one of the inputs and send it to the output based on certain conditions. Okay, so we will look at the maximum function, which retains the maximum of the inputs. The minimum function will retain the minimum of the inputs. The limit function, which is kind of bound the input between two values. The binary select, which can select one of the input and send to the output based on certain condition, and the multiplex also, which can select one of the input and send to the output based on a certain number. Okay, so we will begin with the maximum function. So the maximum function compares the input values and assigns the largest value to the output. So this is a maximum function when the block is not activated. When we now activate that block, the maximum value is transferred to the output. So you can see 2000 is the maximum value that they move to the output out of the three different inputs, so it is the largest. Next we have the minimum. So the minimum is the direct opposite of the maximum. It compares the input values and assigns the least to the output. Okay, so when the block is not activated, the output takes its O value. Okay, so the O value is 0, that's why it's 0 here. When we activate it now, okay, you can see the switch has gone high. Now the minimum value, which is 500, has been moved to the output. Okay, as simple as that. Next, we have the limit function. What the limit function does is that the limit function kind of bound our input between two values called the upper limit and the lower limit. Okay, so when you want to bound your input, you don't want it to go above a certain value or go below a certain value, then you use the limit function. The limit function will set it always between these two limit values, okay, inclusive. Okay, so we have three different scenarios. So the first scenario is a situation where the input value lies between the maximum and the minimum value. In that case, the input value will directly be transferred to the output when the block is activated, when the block is energized. So you can clearly see here that 20 and 100 are the limits, okay, are the limits of this function which we have set, and 78 lies between 20 and 100. So that is why it has been transferred to the output. Okay, so that's the first scenario. But what you should also note is that these parameters, okay, all the inputs and the bounded parameters as well as the output, they must share the same data type. They must be of an identical data type. Okay. Situation 2. Okay, in situation 2, we have a scenario where the input is less than the minimum value. Okay, what happened in this case? In this case, if the input is less than the minimum value, then the minimum value just moves to the output, okay, irrespective of how minimum that value is. All right, so you can now see, okay, here the block is not activated. Let's see a situation where the block is activated. Now we have an input value 10, and you see that 10 is very much less than 20, which is our mean. In that case, 20 is moved to the output. Okay, so our output can never go below 20 and can never go above 100. That's why you see 20 moved to the output, because 10 is less than 20. Okay, so this is a third situation. In the third situation, we have a scenario whereby the minimum value is, where the input value is greater than the max. Okay, so in that case, the maximum is assigned to the output. All right, so just like the case where the input is less than the mean, this is the situation where the input is greater than the max. In that case, we can see here that our input parameter is 130 and we have a bound of 20 and 100. So because it is greater than our maximum value, then it has been moved. Okay, the maximum value has been moved or copied to the output. Okay, all right. So next we are going to look at the binary select or the binary selection. Okay. Now what this function does is this function picks one of the two inputs. You can only take two inputs, so it picks one of the two inputs and then assigns them and assign one of them to the output based on a condition. So unlike maximum, minimum, they can take more inputs, up to about 32 inputs. Okay, but for the select, it takes just two. It takes just two inputs. Okay, so we have this as the function. So we have this as a function, and when the enable pin is not activated, what happens is the output takes its old state. Okay, irrespective of whether G, okay, so G is Boolean in nature, irrespective of whether G is at a logic 1 state or logic 0 state. It takes its old state. Now this is a situation whereby we have now enabled the block. What happens is that if G is 0, then this input 0 is transferred to the output. Okay, so input 0 is transferred to the output, so you can see 100 removed to the output. And if G is 1, then the second input 1 will be moved to the output. So now G is 1, input 1 has been moved to the output. So you can use this block when you want to select one of two values based on certain condition. Okay, it is very, very much easy to manage it using the select block. All right. Next, we will look at the multiplexers. Okay, so multiplexers are just functions that takes in multiple inputs and transfer one of those multiple inputs to the output based on a certain number. Okay, that number is what we call k. So the function says that this function will transfer one of the inputs to the output depending on the value of the input k. Okay, so the number of inputs can be increased when necessary. So for multiplexers, specifically for our Unity Pro controllers part, multiplexers here can only go from 0 to 30, so they can take maximum of 31 inputs. It may change depending on the vendor or the controller. All right. Okay, so let's see how it works. So here, if the block is not enabled, okay, if the block is not enabled, then irrespective of the value of k, so here k is 0, irrespective of the value of k, the output takes its old states. Okay, so first the block must be enabled before any operation can occur, so you should take note of that. Now when that block is enabled, okay, and k is 0, the first input is transferred to the output. So you can see that input 0 has been moved to the output. Okay, and when k is 1, the second input will move to the output. So now k is 1, you can see that the second input, 130, has been moved to the output. And if k is 2, the third input will be moved to the output. Okay, so you may want to transfer certain information to the same location, maybe based on this number. Okay, this number now is your selector. Okay, this is your selector, and it tells you which input will be moved to the output depending on the selector. All right, now let's see how we can practice this. Okay, so I will just open my software. I've already pre-created a project. Okay, so this is a max function. Okay, I've added some comments. Then you can add comments in your application by just clicking here. It says comments, and then you double click there, and you may just type something there. Okay, and you validate. All right, you hit the escape to go out of there, and you can drag it and drop it in whatever location that you so please. Okay, so that's how we add comments to our program. Okay, so we have this is our inputs, or these are our inputs A1, A2. Okay, so what I will now do is that I'm just going to so remember it also told you that you can increase this, okay, by just holding down this key, this arrow, and push it down. You can increase it up to 32. Okay, so now we are working with just 2. Okay, or let's say we add the third one. Let me just call it A4. Okay, so I will just allow it like that. Good. Okay, so let's build a project. I'll build a project. Hope that we have no errors. Okay, we have no errors, no warning. Now I will connect the PLC, and then I will transfer the program to PLC. So the way that we got those blocks are the same, like we have been getting another block. You go to your library here, okay, and then you search for max, min, mux, whatever block that you're looking for. Okay, so now our block is not enabled and everything is 0, 0. What we are going to do is that I'm going to just create an animation table. So I'll just highlight these parameters and then I will highlight it, right click and initialize animation table. So I'll just arrange the window. Okay. I can have a good view. Okay, so our output is A3. These are our outputs, A3, and these are our inputs. So what I will do is I will just give them some value by going to the modification mode. Let me say I'll give this value 20. I'll give this value 25. Then I will give this value, say, okay, so it's not enabled. I've modified these values. Now when I enable that pin, so you see 97 has been moved to the output because it is the maximum number. All right, now let's go to the min also. So for the min, I will just pull its parameters, which are the b1, b2, b3. Okay, again I will modify it to say and b2 to say 8. Okay, now I will enable it, and when I do that, oops, I did not call b3. I should call b1, pb1, pb1. Okay, so I'll call it, and now you see 6 has been moved to the output. Okay, so for limits also I'm going to call the C1, C2, C3, C4, so C4 and PB2. So I'll just type it out, PB. So okay, so I will give them some values. Let's say the minimum value is 30. Let's say my input data is, let's say 45, and let's say my maximum number is, say, 900. Okay, for instance. So I will now enable the block. But you see the limit, it is now within limit, so it has been moved to the output. Let's make it below the minimum. Let's make it, say, 5. So it's now below the minimum. You see the minimum has been moved to the output. Let's say we make it above the maximum, say 1000. Okay, so it is now 1000. The maximum has been copied to the output. Okay, then we have the select. All right, so for the select, we can still modify it directly from here by enabling this to 1 and enabling this to 1 also. If I've enabled it, then I will modify this value, or before I enable it, so let's first of all give them some values. So to do that, I will have to just click here and go to modify parameter. Okay, so there are different ways that you can set values. Let me say I'll give this value 25, and I will give this value, let's say, 10. Okay, so what did you notice? You notice that the block is enabled and the G is now Boolean true, so the second input has been moved to the output. Let's make it false. So I'll make this value false. So 25 has been moved to the output. So when this block is true, input 1 moves to the output. When the block is false, or when G is false, input I move to the output. And if you disable the block, it should maintain each parameter. Okay, so it keeps its old value. All right. Okay, so this is also another scenario of mux. So with mux, depending on this value, an input can be, a certain input will move to the output. Okay, so now the block is not enabled. Okay, here we have nothing. Okay, we have nothing to show. Let's enable the block. So we'll set it to 1. Okay, so we have now input 0. And let's say we modify this value. Let's say we modify this value to, oops, there's a problem. Let's look at it. Let me go to my variable table. Oh, it's a boolean. Okay, so we'll change it. We can change it to double integer. Okay, so it's normal to make mistakes. Change it to double int, and change this to also to double int. Okay, so we change everything to double int. So let's go back to our design. We have to build a project again. So it should take us to the run mode directly. Okay, so everything looks good now. So we were at the level of modifying this input. So I will go to modify. Say I will modify this value to 23. I will modify this value to 50. Okay, so you see right now our block is enabled and k is 0. Because k is 0, so the first input has been moved to the output. Let's say k, let's give k the value. Let's give k the value, say 1. Okay, so k is now 1. Okay, the second input has been moved to the output. All right, now let's look at a scenario where we have more than 2 input data. So what we are going to do is just going to extend this. Okay, since we can extend the inputs. Okay, so I've extended it. I can now just call this, let's say E3. So it is double int, yes. I'll call this E4. Yes. And I'll call this E5. Yes. Okay, I'll build a project again. So it will take me back to the online mode. Okay, so let's say that our k becomes now, let's modify it. So modify value. Let's say our k becomes now 2. So 0 will be moved to the output because in2 is 0. Okay, so let's modify this one to say 100 and change k to 3. So if I change k to 3, then 100 will move to the output. Okay, if I change k to 4, 0 will move to the output because the fourth input data is 0. Okay, so this is how you can select multiple operations or multiple data and send to a common output based on a certain value. Okay, so you can use this to build different applications that will facilitate the program understanding. All right. Okay, so let's go back to our presentation. All right, so let's review what we have learned. So we have now learned the max function, which says that it sets the input with the largest value to the output, the min function, which sets the input with the smallest value to the output, the limit function, which limits the data between the lower limit and the upper limit, and the binary selection, which sets one of the two inputs to the output based on the parameter g, the value of g. And we have multiplexer, that's a max, which sets one of or two of the many inputs, okay, to the output. Okay, so it sets one out of many inputs to the output. All right. Okay, so this brings us to the end of this presentation, and the next section we will look at program control operations, where you can tell where your program should go to based on certain conditions. This is what we are going to study in the next section. Okay, so please, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, share it with your students, share it with your community. If you're also a PLC programmer or you like to program controllers, okay, you can share it with your community, and don't forget to subscribe so that you can always be updated with the different videos that I will be producing. Okay, so stay tuned, and thanks for watching. See you in the next video.